There comes a time in life when the hurried pace finally begins to slow, when the great responsibilities have been met, and we find ourselves standing in the quiet stillness of our later years. This quiet can be a peaceful thing, but sometimes it carries a certain emptiness, a silent question echoing in the mind. What now? What is my purpose? If this feeling is familiar, please know you're not alone. The journey of finding purpose after 70 is not an ending. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one that can be more vibrant and more meaningful than ever before. Today, we will share 5 true and inspiring elderly motivation stories. These are stories about rekindling passion in seniors and proving that the spirit truly has no age. This is Arthur, 78 years old. For 50 years, his life was a fortress built of numbers. He was an accountant, a good one. His world was a predictable landscape of ledgers, spreadsheets, and logic. There was a right answer for everything, a place for every decimal point. And in that certainty, there was comfort. There was a sense of identity. He was Arthur, the man who could make sense of it all. Then came retirement, and the fortress walls crumbled overnight. The steady rhythm of the 9 to 5 was replaced by a vast, echoing silence. The phone stopped ringing. The emails stopped coming. The problems that once filled his mind simply vanished. He would wake in the morning, and the day would stretch before him like an endless, empty road, a blank page. And for a man who spent his life filling pages with purpose, the emptiness was terrifying. He felt obsolete, a relic placed gently on a shelf. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, his granddaughter, Chloe, came to visit. She saw the stillness in his eyes, the way his hands rested in his lap with nothing to do. She left a small, rectangular box on his coffee table. Inside, a simple set of watercolors, a pad of thick, white paper, a few brushes. Just something to try, Grandpa, she said, her voice soft. For days, the box sat untouched, a silent invitation he was afraid to accept. Silly, he thought. I'm a numbers man. What would I do with paint? The inner critic, his lifelong companion, was loud. You're too old to start something new. You'll just make a mess. But the silence in the house grew louder than his doubts. And one day, he opened the box. His hand, which knew the precise weight of a pen, felt clumsy and foreign holding a brush. He dipped it in water, then into a pool of blue. His first touch on the paper was a disaster. A watery, shapeless blob. Nothing like the clear, crisp lines of a spreadsheet. Frustration pricked at him. This world had no rules, no right answers. He almost gave up. He almost closed the box and put it away forever. But then, something shifted. He stopped trying to create something perfect, and he simply watched. He watched the way the blue bled into a touch of yellow, and a vibrant, living green was born right before his eyes. It was a kind of magic, a magic that numbers could never explain. He wasn't thinking about the past or the empty future. He was just there, in that moment, with the color. This was more than just finding new hobbies for the elderly. This was Arthur learning to speak a language he never knew he possessed, the silent, powerful language of his own heart. Slowly, his days found a new rhythm. He would wake up and notice the way the morning light painted gold stripes on the wall. He'd spend hours trying to capture the exact shade of a rose from his garden. He began painting not just what he saw, but what he felt. He painted the deep, sorrowful gray of the day he lost his wife. He painted the bright, hopeful yellow of his granddaughter's laughter. He painted the memory of a seaside trip from 50 years ago. The colors faded, but the feelings still sharp. His small study, once a monument to an orderly past, transformed into a gallery of emotion, a beautiful, chaotic, vibrant mess of life itself. He wasn't painting to hang his work in a museum. He wasn't painting to impress anyone. He was painting to reclaim the parts of himself that had been silent for so long. He was painting to prove to himself that his story was not over, that a new chapter could begin, even now. Arthur's journey is a profound senior inspiration, a quiet, powerful testament to the healing power of creation. and a reminder that sometimes the greatest purpose can be found, not in what we have achieved, but in what we have yet to discover about ourselves. Meet Eleanor, 82 years young. For the past 3 years, since her husband Robert passed, loneliness had become an unwelcome guest in her home, an invisible companion that sat with her at the dinner table and walked with her through the quiet, empty rooms. The house, once filled with Robert's booming laughter and the scent of his pipe tobacco, had become a museum of memories. Every chair, every photograph held a story, but the stories were silent now, and the silence was deafening. Her days became a cycle of small routines, designed only to pass the time, not to live it. One morning, while looking out her kitchen window, her gaze fell upon the forgotten piece of land at the end of her street. It was an eyesore, a tangled patch of weeds, discarded papers, and neglect, a small monument to forgotten things. And in that moment, looking at that lonely patch of earth, Eleanor saw a reflection of how she felt, overlooked, without purpose, left behind. An idea sparked, a tiny, fragile thing at first. It wasn't a grand plan for a community revolution. It was simpler. It was a refusal to let things remain forgotten. Not just the land, but herself. That afternoon, she put on Robert's old gardening gloves. They were too big for her hands. She walked to the neglected lot, her back aching before she even began. She pulled one weed, then another. It was hard, thankless work under the warm sun. Her neighbors watched from their windows, perhaps wondering what the old woman was doing. But she kept going. One small patch of cleared earth became her first victory. The next day, she returned with a packet of tomato seeds. She planted a single row, a small act of faith, a promise of life. Her solitary work didn't go unnoticed for long. A neighbor, a young man named David, brought her a cold glass of water one afternoon. The next day, he came back with his own shovel. He didn't ask many questions. He just started digging. Soon, another neighbor, a mother with 2 young children, came by. Her kids, fascinated, started helping to pick up litter. Someone else dropped off a bag of flower bulbs. Another neighbor offered an old, wooden bench that was sitting in his garage. That forgotten piece of land began to breathe again. It wasn't just Eleanor's project anymore. It became a living thing, nurtured by many hands. The weeds were replaced by rows of vegetables. Wildflowers bloomed in vibrant defiance of the concrete around them. The garden became a place where stories were exchanged over the fence, where the laughter of children mixed with the quiet wisdom of elders. The bench became the neighborhood's unofficial meeting spot. Eleanor had found her purpose in retirement. It wasn't hidden in some faraway place. It was right there, in the soil beneath her fingernails, in the act of connecting, of sharing, of nurturing. The house was still quiet when she returned to the evenings, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was a peaceful quiet, earned by a day of meaning. She was no longer just the widow in the silent house. She was Eleanor, the keeper of the garden. The garden became the heart of the neighborhood, and she was its steady, gentle heartbeat. Who says learning has an age limit? Meet Kenji, 75, a former civil engineer. His mind, for decades, was a precision instrument. It built bridges, designed roadways, and solved complex structural problems. It was sharp, active, and respected. But in retirement, that brilliant instrument began to feel dull. The daily newspaper, the crossword puzzles, they were no longer enough. He felt a gentle, creeping fog settling over his thoughts, a sense that his sharpest days were behind him. The world kept spinning with new ideas, new discoveries, and he felt like he was standing still. One day, sorting through mail, he found a course catalog from the local university. He thumbed through the pages, mostly out of habit, and then a title caught his eye: Introduction to Renaissance Art History. It was a world away from his own, a world of beauty, not blueprints, of interpretation, not calculation. A tiny spark of curiosity flickered to life, and with it, a wave of doubt. What would I, an old engineer, do in a class like that? I'll be ancient compared to everyone else. But the fear of staying the same, became greater than the fear of change. He did a brave thing. He signed up. Walking on a campus that first day felt like stepping onto a different planet. He was a silver-haired island in a sea of youthful energy. He found his seat in a vast lecture hall, his heart pounding quietly. He felt the curious glances. He felt exposed. The professor spoke a language of art and symbolism that was completely new to him. The students around him typed notes on laptops with effortless speed. He felt lost. He felt like he had made a terrible mistake. But Kenji did not build bridges by giving up at the first obstacle. He returned the next week, and the next. He listened. He read every assigned chapter twice. He started to see the physics in the architecture of a cathedral, the engineering in the composition of a sculpture. He started to connect this new world to his own. One day, in a study group, a young student was struggling to understand the perspective in a painting. Kenji, quietly, began to sketch the lines on a napkin, explaining it not in terms of art theory, but in terms of geometry, of sight lines. Suddenly, it clicked for the entire group. In that moment, the age gap dissolved. He wasn't just the old man in the class. He was Kenji, and he had something valuable to offer. Knowledge, he realized, does not care about your age. His life experience gave context to the history they were studying, and their youthful energy, in return, reignited a fire in him. This is the beautiful truth of lifelong learning for seniors. He wasn't there for a grade or a degree. He was there for the pure, simple joy of seeing the world through new eyes, for the thrill of a new idea taking root in his mind. Kenji's story teaches us a powerful lesson. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. And it is never, ever too late to add more fuel. In the quiet attic of every heart, there's a dream we packed away, a promise made by a younger self, carefully wrapped and stored, while life simply happened. For Maria, at 72, that dream lived in a black, dusty case under her bed. And inside that case was a violin. It had been silent for 50 years. 50 years of a life fully lived. A life of being a wife, a mother, a friend. A life filled with the sweet music of lullabies, the rhythm of a busy household, and the steady beat of a loving heart. There was no room, no time for the violin, and she had made her peace with that, or so she thought. Retirement brought a new kind of quiet. The children were grown, with lives and music of their own. The house was calm, orderly, but in the stillness, she began to hear a faint echo, a ghost of a melody she couldn't quite place, a forgotten part of herself, calling out from a long way off. One rainy afternoon, she knelt down and pulled the case from its hiding place. The clasps were stiff, protesting with a metallic groan. As she lifted the lid, the air filled with the scent of old wood and dried rosin, the scent of her youth. There it was. Its varnish was dull, its strings were loose, but it was still beautiful. It was a time capsule, a silent keeper of a promise. She lifted it to her shoulder. The familiar curve felt alien now. Her fingers, softened by time and marked with age spots, felt clumsy and unsure as they found their place on the neck. These were fingers that had baked 1,000 cookies, tended to scraped knees, and held her husband's hand for 47 years. They no longer knew the language of the strings. She picked up the bow. Her first attempt to draw a note was a painful, scratching sound, a wounded cry that filled the quiet room. It was a mockery of the music that lived in her memory. Frustration, sharp and hot, pricked at her eyes. The inner critic whispered, "It's too late. You've lost it." She put the violin down. The silence that returned felt heavier than before. But the melody in her heart, however faint, refused to be silenced. The next day, she tried again. And the day after that, she started not with symphonies, but with simple scales, the same one she had learned as a girl. Her fingers ached. Her arm grew tired. The notes were often sour and out of tune. But she kept on. This was a different kind of practice. It was a quiet battle, fought not for an audience, but for herself. Then one evening, it happened, just for a moment. Her fingers and the bow moved in perfect harmony, in a single, clear, beautiful note soared into the room. It hung in the air, pure and true. It was the voice she remembered. Her voice. A tear rolled down her cheek. It was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of recognition. That single note was all the encouragement she needed. She discovered a small advertisement for a local senior orchestra. The never-too-late players, they called themselves. The thought of playing for others was terrifying, but the thought of playing alone forever was worse. Walking into that first rehearsal, she found not a room of virtuosos, but a room full of people just like her. A retired doctor on the cello, a former teacher on the flute, each one with their own story of a passion set aside, and now, being rediscovered. There was no judgment here, only a shared understanding, a shared joy. When they played together, something magical happened. The individual, imperfect notes blended into something warm and rich and beautiful. It wasn't the sound of a professional symphony. It was the sound of resilience, the sound of joy being reclaimed. Rekindling passion in seniors is not always about starting something new. Sometimes it's about having the courage to say hello again to the person you used to be. When Maria plays her violin now, she isn't just making music. She is telling the story of her whole life. A melody of love, of patience, of loss, and of the beautiful, triumphant return of a long-forgotten dream. A beautiful house can be filled with success, but that does not mean it is full of life. Meet David, 85 years old. By every worldly measure, he had won the game. A former CEO, his life was a testament to ambition and achievement. His house was large and elegant, filled with art and awards. His name was respected. His past was decorated with triumphs. He had built an empire, but now the empire was run by others. The phone calls had ceased. The urgent meetings were distant memories, and the large, elegant house was profoundly quiet. The awards on the wall seemed to mock him with their silence. The art felt cold to the touch. He had everything a man could want, and yet an aching void echoed in the spaces between the heartbeats of the grandfather clock in the hall. He had climbed to the top of the mountain, only to find that the view was lonely. He was a king in an empty castle. He started taking long walks, just to escape the silence of his own success. One afternoon, his walk took him past the public library. He hadn't been inside one in years. Seeking refuge from a sudden chill in the air, he stepped inside. He was met with a warm, comforting smell of paper and knowledge. On a community bulletin board, covered in flyers for yoga classes and bake sales, a small, unassuming piece of paper caught his eye. It was typed, not professionally printed. Volunteers needed, it read. Share the joy of reading with children. Tuesday and Thursday mornings. The idea was almost absurd. Him, David Sterling, who once commanded boardrooms, reading about talking animals to a group of children, his powerful voice, honed for negotiations and speeches, felt ill-suited for fairy tales. And yet, something pulled at him. It was different. It was small. And for a man whose life had been about being big, its smallness was intriguing. He left without signing up, but the notice stayed with him. The next Tuesday morning, he found himself standing in front of the library again. He took a deep breath, like a man about to close a multi-million-dollar deal, and walked inside. His first time was awkward. He sat in a small chair, surrounded by a circle of tiny faces, their eyes wide with curiosity. He held the book, Where the Wild Things Are, its pages worn by countless small hands. His voice at first was stiff, the CEO's voice. He read the words correctly, but without magic. Then he looked up from the page. He saw a little girl in the front row, her mouth slightly open, her entire being captivated by the story. He saw a little boy, leaning forward, his eyes full of adventure. They weren't judging him. They weren't evaluating his performance. They were simply receiving the gift of a story. Something inside David unlocked. He remembered the way he used to read to his own children so many years ago. He lowered his voice for the narrative. He made a gruff, rumbling sound for the wild things. A small giggle erupted from the circle. He smiled, a genuine, unpracticed smile. For that 1 hour, he was not a former CEO. He was not the lonely man in the big house. He was the keeper of the magic. He came back on Thursday, and the next Tuesday, he became their storyteller. His booming voice, once used to project authority, now created entire worlds. He was the giant in the castle, the brave knight, the clever fox. The children would run to him when he arrived. Their simple, uncomplicated affection was a currency more valuable than any stock he had ever owned. This became his new purpose in retirement, a purpose not of taking, but of giving, not of building wealth, but of building wonder. David's journey is a powerful senior inspiration. It teaches us that our greatest value is not in what we have accumulated for ourselves. It is in the wisdom, the patience, and the love we can pass on to others. The final chapter of a successful life was not about his own legacy. It was about planting seeds of imagination in the gardens of a new generation. 5 people, 5 stories. They lived different lives, but they all arrived at the same quiet crossroad, and each one found the courage to answer that whisper in their heart. What am I living for now? Their answers were not found in loud applause or in grand monuments to the past. They were discovered in the small, sacred moments, in a single brushstroke, in a tiny seed pushing through the soil, in a turned page of a well-loved book, in a single note hanging sweetly in the air, in a child's trusting smile. They show us that finding purpose after 70 is not about climbing another, higher mountain. It is about learning to tend to the garden that has been waiting patiently inside your own soul. And you, the one who is listening to this right now, the fire inside of you may feel like it has burned down to a soft, glowing ember. But know this, it has never gone out. It is simply waiting, waiting for a gentle breath of courage to glow brightly once more. So tomorrow, perhaps, try one small thing. It doesn't have to be big. It only has to be yours. Call an old friend. Take a walk down a new street. Listen to a song that you once loved. Or simply share your smile with someone who may need it. Because the most beautiful chapter of your life story may not be the one you have already lived. It may be the one that is still waiting to be written.